Hey guys, welcome back to Doc Loyal Talks Comics, and I'm your host, Doc Loyal, just in case you were wondering who this bloke is. Anyway, we have got an initial assessment for you today, and this is one that's going to be very, very well, in my opinion. I think that it's going to do well with you. It did well with me, and the text is called The Thing on the Doorstep. And it's written by Simon Birks with art by Willi Roberts, and it is from Image Comics. And we have this extremely creepy cover right here that kind of gives you an idea of what's going on. And in the beginning, you get to see Ed Derby meet Daniel Upton. So you have Daniel Upton here and Edward Derby here, and they become good friends in a place called Arkham. Now, why every sanatorium has, got to be named Arkham? Probably Batman's fault. But they meet, and it's more of a boarding house, boarding school, that sort of thing. And it's in the early 1900s. Actually, it's in 1899. And Daniel and Edward are both in a library, more of an art gallery, and they're looking in, and it's called Selected Works of the Macabre. And you get to see through this book, you get to see these two guys grow up together. They go from being casual acquaintances to extremely good friends. They call on one another. They know about each other's family life. And unfortunately, Edward has got a penchant for the darker things in life. And so he reads books that, most people would consider satanic. They would consider, not good things to be putting into your mind. But you never really get an idea of what he's got going on. You don't really get a grasp of, is he trying to become John Constantine? Is he trying to, be a wizard like Gandalf? There's darker things to him. But you don't know whether or not he's just studying these things or whether he chooses to act on them. And it just goes through different time frames. Here we have summer of 1911, and he calls on his friends. And they say, you look happy. You look happier than you have in a long time. And eventually, in 1928, Edward returns back to the library at Miskatonic, which was the university that he was studying at. And he speaks to the librarian, and he says, I don't suppose you know how Celia, the old librarian, is. And the guy simply says, she didn't pass, but she's not well. And you get to see in one of these, there you go. You get to see in one of these moments in 1909 that he's in the library at Muscatonic University, and he's reading something in the library, and Celia comes up to him and says it's time, to close, but something must be holding your attention. And he says, yes, it is. And librarians, being the somewhat nosy type that they are, then she goes and opens the books that he was reading. And that's the last that we see of her until the very last page of this book, which I will not spoil here. But this is a very interesting look at horror. It's a very interesting look at friendship and how one friend can just miss the darkness in another person. And you get to see how we get here and what happens in that time. So very, very highly recommended read from Image Comics. And an initial assessment, I'm going to give it an A+, because it kept me entertained, even though it was set in Edwardian Victoria, times. and then kept moving forward literally about a year and then sometimes 5 or 10 years at a time. So you're building upon this history. You're not just thrown into a situation without knowing what's going on, but instead you get to see how this friendship, how this relationship builds, and how these two people trust each other. And at one point, Edward asked Daniel for some money. He says, "I owe these people some money," and Daniel said, "Of course, I'm there for you. You're my friend, and you have always been, and you will always be, and I will always support you in any way that I can." So it's almost nigh upon literature in the story, rather than simply a story about two friends. Instead, you get an idea that there's extremely something dark and nasty waiting on you, come issue 3 or 4, and you will eventually find out exactly what Edward was into in his younger days, and see exactly the darkness that grows within him. So, guys, I cannot recommend this book enough. Check it out if you can find it in your shops. I'm not doing this to spec on it. I'm doing this purely because of the literary value and merit of the book itself. You will love this story, and it will absolutely, absolutely speak to you. So, thanks for watching, guys. Have a wonderful day, and we'll catch you in the next video.